There is a moment, you felt it, where the world around you begins to crack. People raise their voices. Fear floods the room. Decisions get made in a panic. Everything accelerates. And in the middle of all of it, someone doesn't move. Someone breathes. Someone thinks. Someone acts with a precision that looks almost inhuman to those around them. What is that? Is it cold blood? Is it the absence of feeling? Is it some rare gift given only to a few? No. It is discipline. It is philosophy. And 2,000 years ago, men called it the inner citadel. Today we are going to build yours. Let's be honest about the world we live in. We are surrounded by noise. Constant noise. Your phone doesn't just notify you, it trains you to be anxious. Every breaking news headline is engineered to spike your cortisol. Every social media feed is designed to trigger a reaction in you, fear, outrage, envy, because a reactive person is an addicted person. And it's working. Look at the average person today. They wake up and the first thing they do is check their phone. Before they have spoken a word to themselves. Before they have even fully become conscious. They have already handed their nervous system over to the chaos of the world. And throughout the day that reactivity only compounds. A coworker says something cutting, they replay it for hours. The market dips, they spiral into catastrophe. A plan falls apart, they freeze. Psychologists call this emotional reactivity. The nervous system perceives a threat, real or imagined, and the amygdala fires before the rational prefrontal cortex can even engage. In that tiny biological window between stimulus and response, most people lose themselves completely. They say things they regret. They make decisions they would never make from a calm state. They say, I had no choice. But the truth is they gave up their choice the moment they let the panic drive. And here is the deeper problem. Panic is contagious. Behavioral psychologists have documented what is called emotional contagion, the way fear, anxiety, and hysteria spread through groups like a physical virus. When you see others panic, your brain mirrors their state. The voice gets louder around you, the heart rate climbs, the thinking narrows. And so entire organizations fail not because the problem was unsolvable, but because everyone infected each other with fear before anyone could think clearly. This is the default setting of the uninstructed human mind. But it does not have to be yours. Approximately 2,000 years ago, a man who was once a slave sat in the ruins of what might have been despair, and wrote some of the most psychologically precise instructions ever put to paper. His name was Epictetus. He had been enslaved. He had been physically broken. His master once twisted his leg to demonstrate his control over him, and Epictetus said calmly, "You will break it." And when the bones snapped, he said simply, "Did I not tell you so?" This was not a man performing bravery. This was a man who had, through years of philosophical practice, drawn an absolute line between what existed inside him. His will, his judgments, his choices, and everything that existed outside him. Epictetus taught one foundational idea, the dichotomy of control. Some things are in our power. Our opinions, our impulses, our desires, our values, the things we choose to do or not do. Everything else, what others say, what happens in the world, whether the economy collapses, whether the crowd panics, is not in our power. And this is the secret that most people miss. The source of all anxiety is the attempt to control what cannot be controlled. You are not anxious because the world is dangerous. You are anxious because you keep reaching for things your hands cannot hold, and you panic when they slip away. Now listen to Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, commander of legions, responsible for millions of lives. A man who ruled at the edge of empire, in perpetual war, dealing with plague and political treachery and the weight of history. He wrote in his private journal, never intended for public eyes, these words: "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Notice what he didn't write. He didn't write, "You have power over everything." He didn't promise that strength means the storms stop coming. He promised something far more radical, that the storm inside you can be stilled, regardless of what the storm outside is doing. And Seneca, who watched emperors go mad with power, who faced exile, who eventually was ordered to take his own life, Seneca wrote this: "The greatest remedy for anger is delay." In that one sentence lives a lifetime of practical wisdom. Between what happens to you and how you respond, there is a gap. And in that gap lives your entire freedom. Weak people let the gap collapse. The stimulus arrives and the reaction fires in the same breath. The disciplined person widens that gap deliberately. They breathe. They observe. They choose their response rather than simply having one. This is not coldness. This is not detachment. This is mastery. Let us go deeper, because understanding why you panic makes it far easier to interrupt the pattern. When a threat appears, real or perceived, your brain floods your bloodstream with cortisol and adrenaline. Vision narrows. Breathing quickens. The rational, long-term thinking prefrontal cortex goes partially offline. And the ancient, survival-oriented part of your brain takes the wheel. This was brilliant design for the savannah. When a predator was chasing you, you did not need to think. You needed to run. But we are no longer on the savannah. Today, the predator is an email from your boss, a bad quarterly report, a public embarrassment, a relationship conflict. And for these challenges, the stress response doesn't just fail to help. It actively makes you worse. It narrows your thinking precisely when you need it to be wide. It makes you impulsive precisely when you need to be strategic. It makes you loud precisely when you need to be quiet. There is something else at work beneath the surface: ego involvement. The reason most people panic is not simply that the situation is difficult. It is that the situation feels like a threat to their identity, their reputation, their self-image, the story they tell about who they are. When you have built your entire sense of self on external things, what others think of you, how successful you appear, whether your plan is working, then any disturbance to those externals feels like a disturbance to you. And so people don't just react to bad news. They collapse into it. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology had the language to describe it. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, "Never esteem anything as of advantage to you that will make you break your word or lose your self-respect." In other words, guard the internal. The external will always fluctuate. If your peace is located in the external, your peace will always be at the mercy of forces you cannot control. But here is what the neuroscience tells us, and it perfectly mirrors what the Stoics practiced. The stress response can be interrupted. Not suppressed, interrupted. With deliberate breathing, the vagus nerve is activated, and the parasympathetic system begins to restore calm. With deliberate labeling of emotions, simply naming what you feel: I am afraid, I am angry, the prefrontal cortex re-engages and the emotional flood begins to subside. This is what the Stoic practice of morning reflection and evening review was actually doing, neurologically speaking. It was training the practitioner to observe their own mind from the outside, to name it, to study it. And a mind you can observe is a mind you can govern. So, how do you actually build this? Not as an idea, as a practice. Here are the principles. Learn them. Return to them. The first principle: separate the event from your interpretation of it. Nothing has meaning until you give it meaning. A setback is not a catastrophe, it is a setback. A criticism is not a condemnation, it is an opinion. A loss is not the end, it is a loss. Marcus Aurelius called this the practice of objective representation. Strip the event of all the drama your mind adds to it. Look at it bare. Ask, what is actually happening here? Absent my story about it? You will find that 90% of what you feared is the story, not the fact. The second principle: pause before you respond. Always. This is simple. It is not easy. When the emotion rises, and it will rise, do not act from it. Breathe. Count if you must. Create distance between the stimulus and your response, even if it is only 5 seconds. In those 5 seconds, you are exercising the single most powerful faculty a human being possesses: the choice of how to respond. Seneca wrote, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." The pause is not passivity. The pause is precision. The third principle: focus only on your own conduct. When others panic, you will be tempted to manage their panic, to argue with it, to convince them to be rational. This is a trap. You cannot control what others feel. You can only control what you do. Your calmness is your contribution. Your clarity in the storm is the most useful thing you can offer those around you. Not because you are above them, but because someone has to be the anchor and you have decided it will be you. The fourth principle: prepare for adversity before it arrives. The Stoics practiced something called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Before beginning a day, a journey, a venture, they would sit quietly and imagine the worst that could reasonably happen. Not to cultivate fear. To drain fear of its power. When you have already walked through the worst case in your mind, calmly, clearly, with the question, what would I do if this happened? You are no longer caught off guard when difficulty arrives. You have already been there. You have already practiced returning. And here is the gift: most of what you feared never arrives. But your readiness does. The fifth principle: identify what cannot be taken from you. This is the deepest root of Stoic resilience. They could take Epictetus's freedom. They could take his body's wholeness. They could exile Seneca from everything he had built. They could send Marcus Aurelius to the most brutal front of the Roman Empire, again and again for years. But none of them, could reach inside and take the quality of their own minds. Your character cannot be taken. Your integrity cannot be taken. Your capacity to think, to choose, to love what is true and good. This belongs to you absolutely regardless of what the world does. When you know this, truly know it, not just intellectually, the panic of the world loses its grip on you. Because you realize they cannot touch what actually matters. Here is the image I want to leave with you. Imagine a great fire burning in the center of a field. Those who have never trained themselves run from it, screaming, infected by each other's fear, making decisions based entirely on panic. And in their panic they often run in the wrong direction entirely. But one figure stands still. Not because they feel nothing. Not because the fire doesn't reach them. But because somewhere in their life they decided to study fire. They decided to understand it. To practice standing near it without being consumed. That figure is not a hero from myth. That is a human being who has chosen discipline over reaction, reflection over impulse, wisdom over the noise of the crowd. Every one of you watching this has the capacity to become that person. Marcus Aurelius was not born an emperor. He was not handed his philosophy. He wrote those meditations in a military tent, in the cold, after years of war, writing to himself because he knew that without constant cultivation, the mind returns to its default of chaos. He was working on himself. Every single day. That is your work too. The world will panic again. It will panic tomorrow. It will panic next month, next year, for as long as human beings are human beings. The question is not whether the storm comes. The question is whether you have built something inside yourself that the storm cannot reach. Seneca wrote to a friend near the end of his life these words: retire into yourself as much as you can. Not retreat. Not avoidance. Retirement into the self, into the one place no chaos can follow you without your permission. That is where your calm lives. Go find it. Go build it. Go return to it again and again until it becomes the only home you need. If this reached something in you, something you want to understand more deeply, then you are already walking the path. This is warrior philosophy. Every week we return to the great thinkers, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and more, and we draw from them what is most useful to the person alive right now in this world fighting these battles. Subscribe. Not for entertainment. For the practice. The strongest mind you will ever encounter is the one you are capable of building. We will help you build it,